This is a continuation of the tale of Aphrodite after her escape from Mount Olympus. It was known that she escaped into the French and Danish countryside around the 9th century just prior to the Crusades, and I think I may have discovered where she escaped to. King Henry became suspicious of his wife's, whose identity is not mentioned in the documentary I extracted this information from, departure from church just before Mass would begin, and one day ordered his guards to hold her one day as she was leaving. She took flight through the window and was not seen again afterward. She had given the king only one daughter, Matilda, whom he had arranged to marry King Geoffrey the Fair, who gave birth to 3 sons and began the bloodline of the Plantagenets, which was the name for a flower, possible author to the Voynich manuscript. No one knows why this nickname was given to him. Among those sons a blood flood was born that ravaged the English countryside, with civil war between family members like that told in the vision of Enoch. For when there was nothing left for the warring families to raid from each other, then they turned on the people. The legend of Matilda says that in the winter of 1142 AD Matilda and her forces were cornered in a garrison by her cousin Stephen, and usurper of her father, King Henry's throne that he left to her. In the cloak of darkness, shrouded in white linen, she escaped through the snow past Stephen's army and into the night. She travelled for 7 miles in the snow and cold to safety in Williamshire Castle. As she gave birth to a direct descendant of Henry, and he also inherited King Geoffrey's red hair. King Henry was ambitious, however at that time another noble was rising to infamy. The daughter to the Lord Regent of Aquitaine, Eleanor, became the most sought-after prize at that time, was first claimed by the King of France, Louis VII. He soon had the marriage annulled after she gave him only daughters. Eleanor reached out to Henry, and after evading many kidnappers who sought to force her into marriage because of the large amount of land she inherited, she met with Henry and married him in what was considered a most scandalous wedding. Henry returned to England to find it ravaged by civil war between his mother's loyal forces and his uncle, Stephen's armies. Their armies gathered along the banks of the river, but Stephen and Henry were devastated by the tolls of war upon their own kin and negotiated instead. Stephen named Henry his heir to the throne, and a year later Stephen died of a wrenching pain in his stomach, and blood came from his mouth, an ominous death that left Henry King of England. The first act as king, Henry designed a new system of justice where the innocence of a person was decided by duel, was replaced by the option of 12 knights appointed to review the situation and decide by opinion the innocence or guilt of a person. This non-violent process became a standard of a new way of justice. Not only that, still stands in England, but became the foundation of American justice upon the start of it becoming a country, and is still used to this day. It gave birth to the English Parliament and US justice system that declares an accused criminal innocent until proven guilty. She bore him 5 sons and 3 daughters, one of whom was Richard the Lionheart, who was quoted saying, "From the devil we came and to the devil shall we return." Henry, it seems, also suffered from the curse of Kronos. Every one of his sons whom he had turned to and considered an heir to the throne, turned right back around and attempted to overthrow him, just as Kronos did to Uranus and Zeus to Kronos, as well as Ares to Zeus. Another intriguing aspect is that I found that when comparing a modern terminology translation of the Book of Enoch to the events of the early British royal family here, I find many identical descriptions. It leaves me to wonder if whether this chain of events are the ones that God had based his final judgment upon, the Rashiem by God. Let me take this opportunity to fix a clerical error, which is not only an error of definition but their role as well. The children of the fallen angels, the Titans, the Olympians, the bloodline is actually called the Rashiem. The Nephilim were described as being angels who had come down to earth, or the egregorian spirit guardians that were sent here to watch over mankind and protect them. Mankind eventually exalted them because of their display of power and magic and began to worship them. These were the 200 angels sent to earth under Lucifer's command at the time before his fall. They eventually came to have children with the mortal women, and thus the Nephilim gave birth to the Rashiem, who grew out of control and fought among each other, scarring the earth with their conflict. Lucifer, as the Nephilim's commander, was held responsible for the entire issue, and in thus seeing the final outcome of this conflict and viewing the resulting feud of the British royal bloodline and its influence that brought about the Crusades and the Spanish Inquisition, as well as the hardships and persecutions felt throughout the Dark Ages, God surmised his decree of them being abominations and ordered their destruction. Ah, well, that was quickly answered, eh? To save time and confusion, I shall include the translation of Enoch's tale that resembles the events that unfolded within the early royal British family's history. Translation of Enoch's tale in modern terminology. Then, as time passed and generations had gone by, approx over 200 years, and the genetic mold affection of interbreeding had sustained, mankind began to bear physically appeasing daughters. The angels said, "Let us go now and take wives of these women, for they shall bear us a better bloodline without genetic deformations." Their children grew to be powerful beings, and when man could no longer maintain control of them, they turned on mankind and destroyed them and wreaked havoc upon the earth with their power. They made war against the animals and unbalanced the elemental flows of nature. Then they made war against each other, destroying all in their path. And I, Enoch, was given insight by the high council of the sages who served under the king of that era. It was then that a messenger of the soothsayers asked me to write a confession of a terrible deed done by the ones who sent him, so that their conscience can be cleared. I learned from a recount of the events told to me in secrecy that I shall now write down, for it was something that could not be spoken of in public. I knew, though once I learned of what had occurred, that no one shall grant them forgiveness for what they had done, and if this confession should come to light, then their punishment shall be death without remorse. And so I begin to write the account of what had transpired, and it involves the king's highest court officials and begins with the nobility of the line of heirs to the throne. Amidst the noble court was a bloodline to the king whose reputation was strong and loyal for generations to the kingdom, and had been through many a turmoil within the kingdom's history. And one of the confessor's versions said that this is the account of what transpired from what happened to me. And go forth, Enoch, for you are a representative of those who will judge us, and tell them not to judge us as with discrimination as members of the court, but as men with an open mind to a bigger picture of things that transpired. I asked, have you not ever left the courtship of the nobility and sought to find romance with those of common society? For we have found wives among the common class and have had children with them, and those children have become great leaders among the common class, and it is they who ravage the outskirts of the kingdom. It is they who are making sieges against the kingdom and challenging the rule of the king. And Earl said to me, here shall you hear of the events of their children, and their noble citizenship is allowing them to pass unchecked among the people, and how they shall lead them to follow the ones who seek to revolt and rebel against the authority of the king. And how it shall lead them to be slain under the swift hand of judgment against those who would strike in treason against their king, and it will lead to many, many deaths. And one of the king's court messengers showed me where to lead them once I discover their identity, to a place to be ambushed where they shall be judged and sentenced for their deeds, and it shall be a sentence of death which will abruptly be carried out there in the place they are led to. Then I was led to another place where representatives who are strong in their loyalty to the kingdom, and they have been given the responsibility to pass the harsh penalties and carry them out upon those found guilty. And there was a council member among them that none had ever met before, who had been appointed by the king. His association to the king was direct, and his communication was sent directly by him, and none could oppose his word, for it came straight from the king himself. And I asked, who is this man whose word cannot be questioned? Who is to say that we can trust this man's intent? Then Michael, who was the kingdom's highest-ranking captain of the guard, replied, this man whom you ask of, whose authority is like that of the king himself, is his son, and his loyalty is without question, for he is his direct descendant and heir to the throne. Then I asked, what of this man who has been appointed the task of this role before him? Why can he not be trusted? And another honored guardsman, Raphael, said, this man was appointed by our forefathers and sits upon his place by their appointment of authority, but their deeds have been revealed, and his place is now to be replaced, and he is to be judged. And after that I was shown another event unfold, and before I saw a multitude of the kingdom's army standing before the throne of the king, and those legions captains stood before the throne of the king. Their names were made known to me as they were being praised and given medals for their deeds that brought victory in the face of battle, and it was made known to me that these men of valor were those whose confessions I now write. The first one was he who always vowed loyalty to the kingdom and to the king in all he did. The second held his loyalty to the son during the uprising of the people against his appointment of authority over them. And the third was one who stepped in to defend the nobility who were innocent and falsely accused. And I heard a fourth who went down among the common class during the conflict and defended the innocent people and fought against those who sought to shame the king's name with their innocent convictions. And I asked the messenger of justice who these four were that were praised and then cast down. And he said to me, the first was Michael, who was made to be the scapegoat of these events and captain of the guard. The second was Raphael, who was set up to take the fall for people's revolts against the sun. The third was Gabriel, who was the one set up to be blamed for the convictions against the nobility. And the fourth was Earl, who was the one set up to take the blame for the conviction against the people to sever their trust in the king and his kingdom. And after that I saw the chain of events that transpired because of this, and the system of law that was set in place because of these events. And the generations that followed because of this event were secured in their place as nobles, and their system of justice drove the guilty from their lands by this process. And I saw that there among the lineage of the son of the king was one who had memories from the distant future, and with him was a being who looked like a man, but his features were evolved and different from those around him. And I asked who was that man and the one with him. And I learned of the secrets behind the one who was to be called the Son of Man, and I was shown of all the secrets of the one who stood with him, and from when he came, for he was not of that era, and why he walked with the Son of Man. The messenger spoke and told me that this is the Son of Man who will bring the teachings of this justice and righteousness to the world when justice is forgotten in the world. And this Son of Man shall break the hold that those kings have upon the world in his day, and shall undo the corruption their rule has done to the world. And the deeds of his life shall become examples from which all things that are righteous and all things that are just and wise shall base themselves upon. And he that is from the distant future shall know of his deeds and take with him to his era, so that all shall learn from the ways of the Son of Man. Now from this point I no longer am translating much, for it seems to directly be speaking to me. And he who is the morning star, bearer of the first dawn in creation, shall be brought his teachings and ways, and his name shall be known to him who came before all else was made. He shall be a light to those who live righteous, so that he shall not fall, and bring hope to those who have none, and all in the world shall praise his name and sing songs of his life, and shall call him the righteous one among the outcasts. And for this reason he was hidden from him who came before the creation of the world, Lucifer. And for this he has revealed himself through him to the world, and because of him the righteous were saved, because of they who have hated and despised him and all his works in the ways of the Lord. For in his name they are saved. And for this he shall show them compassion, for his compassion is great, as too is his righteousness in his judgment. And in those days the earth shall give back what it has been entrusted, for it shall give back that which it has received, as too shall hell give back that which it owes. For the appointed Son shall arise from among them, and he shall choose the righteous and the holy from among them, for the day has drawn nigh that they too shall be saved. And in those days the appointed Son shall sit upon my throne, and all the secrets of wisdom shall pour forth from his mouth, and so too all the counsel that the spirits have given him, and his name shall be exalted from every mountain to every ocean to every bird, all shall give praise to him. So a recap synopsis of what this all means is that for one, this is a compiled volume of accounts, and none of them are complete, it seems. The first part seems to be a scribe's record of an ancient confessional was taken after the events had transpired and chaos had befell the kingdom because of it. At first it goes into some conspiracy within the king's court that targeted a long-standing and loyal family of the king's mobile court. Then the recording jumps into another account of someone who had bought children outside of the noble class, and those children were abusing the right of their birth but also being used by opposing parties outside the kingdom's borders. Then the recording jumps ahead as if the actual confession had been purposely removed. Then the recording begins another account, I think of the same scribe but further in time, where the scribe was used by the corrupt faction to betray and ambush individuals who he had been told were guilty of treason and were to be executed. Then the recording changes again forward to a description of 4 heroes to the kingdom during the chaotic events that had transpired, but each of them were being set up to take the fall of major scenarios that had happened during the event. Then it goes into the description that this noble saga was what inspired the justice system that mankind still utilizes today. Then the recording gets weird and begins to go into what seems to be an early prophecy of the coming Messiah, along with a prophetic vision of not only his coming but my deciphering of the texts further into the future of our time. And goes into details that my deciphering of that text will have some impact on the society of the world and bring the words of the Messiah and the aspects of justice back to the world in our time, where both aspects are lost to us all. This event will usher in not only, it seems, the second coming of Christ, well, the teachings of his word that is, but it seems to single me out to be the appointed son to sit upon his throne and speak great works of wisdom that will become like a fountain to this era. Then it goes into a basic description of the rapture and the beginning of the final judgment. This work and my translation of its old descriptive language into modern terminology could be what is known as the breaking of the seal of the Lamb. When the Son sits before the congregation and begins to open the 7 seals of Judah. Another interpretation of it can be said that the question of whether my name is found within the book of life is a definite yes. So then how is it that I am destined to fall from heaven, as it is said is the destiny of the adversary, that I have already lost, and will be cast down? However, according to my interpretation of this, it says basically that my being cast down from heaven is not the conclusion of my destiny. That Jesus himself comes and brings me salvation through his word in the end, and the assurance that God did not abandon me to this foretold fate because I had remained faithful in him. That this event is his grand design, the big picture behind it all, the why of everything he allowed to transpire happened so that the world could see that it was plans of those who hated me for my destiny, and through all this the truth was revealed, and once exposed, Christ himself comes to me in the final hour to bring me salvation and forgiveness for what had happened because of them. And by showing me mercy and compassion, strengthened by my faith in him, that this divine actual reset virtue in the world and righteousness will be found again by mankind, emblazoned by this example he sets forth by my judgment. Thus setting the stage for not just me but for all those who dwell in hell, who sought forgiveness and salvation to be forgiven and taken from hell. Thus displaying the long sought after answer to the question of that is hell eternal, and can one be saved after condemned to hell? That answer is no, for Jesus will come separating those who are to be saved from those who still need to learn the error in their ways. Wait, hold on a tick, I just realized what this is. It is a compendium of my deeds in life, but the prefix tales are past judgments for events that happened to other individuals that were similar to the events that happened to me. Like when the court system during trial will bring up a prior case of what she's face versus the state of whatever, and they state what course of judgment was taken and how the process was applied to come to that judgment. And those events that are foretold have already happened to me in my current era. It's much like the boy who was reading the book in the never-ending story when he came to the part that was describing exactly what he was doing as he was reading.
You escaped that